if you are from West Virginia and you know about Winfield, it's located in Putnam County. It's the county seat in Putnam County. You probably know a few names from that town, i.e., Leon McCoy, legendary Winfield high school football coach. Jim Letts played basketball and football at Winfield way back when. Bud Letts, another name as well. But a name that you all may not know is from Winfield that has done very well for himself, if I may be the first, and probably if not the last person to say so, that has succeeded tremendously in the Division 1 and 2 basketball rankings as well. So we're going to dive into this because I'm very excited for this, quite frankly. And before my guest and I got on the air, we're just like, we're both from Winfield. Let's talk a little about Winfield. But before we do, let's dive right into his bio because, as everybody knows, I love diving into bios, and this is my favorite part of doing this. But before we continue, you can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7, and you can find the podcast at Apple Podcast, YouTube, and Spotify as well. And I encourage you all to subscribe and, hey, give us a rating. I looked the other day on Apple Podcasts, and we had 2 very, very well thought out messages on Apple Podcasts. So I appreciate whoever's sending both of those messages as well. Just, again, self-motivation just to continue to do this as always, but I appreciate that as well. Well, again, let's dive right into our guest today because, again, I'm excited and I've been excited, quite frankly, but let's make our guest not wait any longer. Before we do that, my guest record, he has eclipsed 576 career wins, which means he's 24 wins shy of that milestone called 600 wins. Very few coaches can say they've reached that mark, and my guess is 24 wins away. He will be entering his 36th overall season as a head coach in the Division 1 and 2 rankings in college basketball. He'll be entering his 3rd season at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith, and he is ranked 8th nationally in wins among active coaches and 32nd all-time as well. Again, tremendous honors for my guest. And again, I'm excited to talk about more about how he got there as well. He actually spent a season over in Buchanan where he coached the West Virginia Wesleyan College Bobcats, and he guided them to a school record 22 wins at the Division II level in the program's first ever Division II regional tournament championship appearance. So again, high honors for my guest. And again, let's not wait any longer because let's bring him in. My guest, for however you may be listening or watching this program, is for our 66th episode of Hoops Across the Mountain State, is none other than the legendary head coach, Mr. Jim Boone. Jim, welcome to the program.
Taylor, thank you very much. You're too kind. I don't deserve all the accolades you have already bestowed upon me, but thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be with another West Virginian, particularly someone who also hails from the Winfield area. So, yeah, I'm excited too. Let's get started.
So 2 things real quick. So 1, Jim, this is a podcast, so you can just brag about yourself however long you want to. I'll sort of just sit back. If you just want to just start, just as they say, just sort of lick the pages of the yellow pages and just start flipping through and just, if you just do that, I'd be fine with that. But also, second thing, us Winfield people, we have to stick together. It's one of those things. It's a tight-knit group, and we got to stick together.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. I had a great childhood, the opportunity to grow up in Winfield and to compete. When I was in school, obviously Winfield was very small and a very tight-knit, strong athletic community, which really centered around our football program. And Coach Leon McCoy, the head football coach, who was also my neighbor for years in Shawnee Estates. But, I played, you played everything. We played football, we played basketball, we played baseball, we ran, we did all the different things. But as I progressed through the years, basketball became kind of my favorite and the one that I had the most success in. So it's kind of where I, spent the majority of my time. And I was really fortunate that I played with a great group of guys. and we ended up being the first team to make it to the state championship my senior year. And those guys still keep touch and tabs on all of them today. I was really, you don't realize it at the time because you're just kind of, flowing through it, but having the opportunity to be in coaching as long as I have and to look back, man, I was just I was part of a great group. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit, some of the people from Winfield, and that's another one. I mean, just the coaches. One of my early teammates and one of my high school best friends, Bob Starkey. Bob and I speak, on a very regular basis. Bob being now down at Auburn, coaching on the women's side of it. Jimmy Tribble, who was a tremendous football and baseball player, and has went on to an unbelievable coaching career himself at the high school level. And you just go on and on down the line. It's amazing how many coaches and teachers came from that era and came from Winfield High School. So I was really very fortunate to be a part of that, and couldn't have been happier to have had those opportunities and those memories.
You mentioned a guy that I also mentioned as well whenever I introduced the podcast. That's Leon McCoy, and recently had passed away in the last few years. But you had mentioned that you used to be neighbors with him, so I find this very fascinating. How much of an impact did Coach McCoy play on you early on in your childhood?
Oh, Taylor, a ton. I played football early on, and Coach McCoy was a big part of that. Of course, there was a little bit of peer pressure because if you didn't play football, you weren't looked upon too highly because everybody played football. But Friday nights in Winfield was an event. Going to the high school football game, and as a kid, you just wanted to be a part of that. So having Coach as my neighbor, I can remember when my parents built a basketball court in our backyard for me, and I can remember Coach making fun of me, but he loved it. I knew he loved it because, I'd get up in the morning and work out and shoot before we went to school, before we caught the bus. And he'd make fun of me the next day in school or that day in school. And that was pretty cool. But yeah, he had a big influence on me as a person. He's one of the best men I've ever known. Tremendous coach. As I said, we just had a lot of really good coaches and teachers that were a part of our high school system during that time. Alan Osborne, who's now at Polka High School, was my junior high school basketball coach, and I was a part of his first team, his first group that he inherited coming from college and getting his first coaching job. He and I are best friends today. I mean, we talk 2 or 3 times a week. So all those guys, all those coaches had a tremendous impact on me and who I am today.
Do you sort of see Leon McCoy a little bit in you whenever you go out onto that court and you're coaching your guys? Do you sort of see a little bit of Leon McCoy in you?
I think anybody that had an opportunity to be around Coach McCoy had, probably see, particularly if you end up going into coaching and teaching, because I had and it's no secret, particularly during those days, I was out for football in the summer of my freshman year, and my knee swelled up a little bit, so I had to go through some testing. And during the testing, I was really fortunate. They found that I had a tumor on my femur, and they didn't know if it was cancerous or if it wasn't. So I had to have surgery, had to have the tumor removed, had the bone from my lower leg was grafted into my femur. And it was I didn't know it at the time. I just said, I got to have surgery and we'll get better. But it was a very serious surgery. And Coach McCoy and Bill Hughes, who was his assistant at the time, they came to visit me a couple different times in the hospital. So there's no doubt he's had an influence on me. But after that, I wasn't allowed to play football until my senior year, which at that time I was so deep into basketball. I didn't see much sense going out for football. I put all my time into hoops, and the coaches I had then, from Alan Osborne and Coach Hunt, Bill Wall, um, Jim D'Agostine, who was at Polka, but obviously, everybody knew who he was and he had an influence. All those guys have played a very important role uh, in helping me to be a better coach, and more importantly, a better person. But frankly, Taylor, I don't know anyone that had a greater influence on me and played a greater role on me as a coach uh, in person than Alan Osborne has, uh, particularly through the years here, and how we've been able to share the game and share our lives together. So it's, again, I wouldn't trade the things that I had the opportunity to experience and grow with at Winfield and Winfield High School. I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world.
Let's talk a little bit more about your basketball career before we get into the bulk of this episode, which is more of a focus on your coaching career. But when you look at your prep career, or maybe just even your basketball career as a player in general, just at what point did you know that basketball was always going to be there right by your side, and you just wanted to continue to play? Because as you said, growing up in Winfield, you had it was pretty much an obligation to play basketball, football, baseball, but then
Yeah.
you found that basketball was your true passion. At what point did you figure that out and you knew that, hey, I need to stick with this?
Probably after my surgery that I referred to, and having not been able to play any sports at all my freshman year, and then coming back as a sophomore and really putting a ton of time into basketball, knowing that I couldn't play football and had missed the baseball season from the previous spring and summer. So as I started really putting time into basketball, I just, it was obvious it was something that I loved to do. I'll be the first one to tell you, I was an average player, probably, truth be known, maybe a little bit above average, but I played with a tremendous group of guys who were and some of them very talented. And I was very fortunate to be a part of a really good group that was pretty close, and had a chance to progress and go through things. And so, because of this, and it wasn't because of my individual abilities, it was because of the success our team had. It led to my opportunity to go to West Virginia State and play. I was supposed to go to Marshall, and at that time, Stu Aberdeen was the coach at Marshall, and he had provided me an invited walk-on spot. And so I was set to do that because I kind of knew I wanted to be a coach. And we can talk about that more here in a little bit. But Bob Maxwell, who was the head coach at West Virginia State, called me and came to see me and my parents, and really recruited me. And it's the first time I'd really been recruited at that level to go play at State. And so I did that and made some amazing, friendships there. The chance I had to grow as a player, but again, more importantly, as a person. And having grown up in Winfield in those days, we were not diverse in any way whatsoever. But when I went to West Virginia State and had the opportunity to be on the basketball team, we were very diverse. And so the chance to learn from other guys, to develop lifelong friendships, which is what you do in college and high school on your teams. I tell guys all the time, and the guys that play for us, when you later on in life, people aren't going to, you're not going to remember how many games you won or even championships or those kind of things. What you're going to remember are the relationships you developed, your teammates, and, the times riding on the bus or the van, or the practices, and, some of the failures, and the blood, the sweat, and the tears, so to speak. Those are the things that are going to stick with you, and the opportunity to share in each other's lives and each other's families as you go along. So again, Taylor, I just, I lived a charmed life, so to speak. I was in the right places at the right time with great people.
Okay, so we just mentioned your playing career. Now let's take a jump, leap, and a hop into your
Okay.
coaching career. So you would sort of sprinkle on how you got involved with it. Who were some early mentors for you that just played a monumental role in getting you into the coaching ranks, and then slowly you just saw yourself developing into a coach that eventually is now a very successful one?
Well, the first thing is, we've talked a lot about coaches and teams, and my parents were the best. My mom and dad, I think about all the, trips my mom made from Shawnee Estates to the Winfield High School to take me to workouts, to take me to weightlifting, to pick me up. My mom and dad never missed a game. My dad was, he was my biggest fan and at times my hardest critic, but always in a very positive and constructive way. So there's nobody that had a greater influence on me and helped me to be who I am today than my parents did. But being a part of that athletic community at Winfield and seeing coaches, I can remember going back and Ron Chambers and Doug McElwain, uh, along with Coach McCoy and then Alan Osborne over at Polka High School, and just being around those guys and how good they were as people, how driven they were in terms of their coaching and the impact that they wanted to make on people's lives, to help young people. I really knew that's what I wanted to do. But as I went to school, my parents didn't really want me to, be a teacher or be a coach. They didn't understand that part of it. And so, I talked to my coach at West Virginia State, Bob Maxwell, and his son went into financial accounting. And so he told me that, and I said, okay, I'll go into accounting. So I did my undergrad in accounting at West Virginia State, and I did well in it, but I did not like it. And I even entertained the thought at one point of being an attorney and going to law school all the way to taking the LSAT um, and being admitted into several different schools. And I can remember after that happened going and sitting down with my parents, and I said, hey, look, I can do this. I can go to law school and I'll make it. But the people that are in law school, that's their passion. They love it and they're going to be great at it. I don't know that I can ever be great at it because I don't really love it. And they were like, well, what do you love? I said, I love teaching. I love coaching. I love working with young people. And my dad was like, can you make money doing that? Can you have a life doing that? And so I said, well, I think so, and I kind of at one point my dream was to be a junior high school basketball coach. I thought that would be the greatest thing ever. But as I went through college, I got hooked on college athletics and I wanted to coach at the college level. And so I made a deal with my parents. I'd been at state for 4 years on scholarship and did really well. And they said, if you'll go to grad school, we don't care what you get your degree in, just go to grad school. I think they wanted me to have something to fall back on. They still weren't sure about this coaching deal. And so I agreed to do that. And of course, where did I want to go? I got to pick anywhere I could go and what I wanted to do. I went to the University of Kentucky, the absolute best basketball program probably at the time, close to home that I had some relevance to. So I went there and got my MBA. And so from there, I got offered a job in business, a really good job that eventually was paying six figures plus in the late 80s. And I turned that job down and took a the assistant job at West Virginia State. And there, as they say, the rest is history. I spent 3 years there helping turn that program around, actually 4 because I volunteered for a year. Then was on the payroll for 3 years. Then I decided my ambition was so strong to be a head coach, and I knew I couldn't be a head coach probably at the level I wanted to be as an assistant coach at West Virginia State. So I made a jump to Division I and went to Baptist College, which is now known as Charleston Southern University in Charleston, South Carolina. And I took that job for $6,000. I was married, took that job for $6,000 and lived in the dorm and ate in the cafeteria. So my wife and I lived in the dorm. We ate in the caf. I made my $6,000. And I tell you what, I loved every second of it. The opportunity to coach at that level and be around, we had a tremendous team. I worked for a great head coach in Tommy Gaither. And, it led me to the opportunity to reach my eventual goal, which was become a head coach, probably much earlier than I should have become a head coach. I think I was 26, 27 years old when I took the job at California University of Pennsylvania, just outside Pittsburgh, and wasn't ready. Thought I was, but I will say this: all the years I spent at Winfield, studying coaches and being a part of coaches there, having the chance to go to West Virginia State as an average player at best, and really become a student of the game, to be around some of the great people that I had a chance to be around, to be at the University of Kentucky and Joe B. Hall giving me the opportunity to come in and watch practice anytime I wanted, which for me was a daily routine. Even though I feel like I could have spent more time in terms of honing my craft and becoming prepared, I was prepared for that moment. So when I stepped in at California University of Pennsylvania, I was ready to go and excited, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been really fun. It's been very rewarding. It's been I think my parents would both be very proud, and to know that we were able to not only make a few dollars along the way, but turn it into a career that now my son has decided to do the same thing, and he's actually on our staff here at UAFS. So it's been again, as I said, I've lived a charmed life. So I've loved every minute of what I've done.
Before we continue in our discussion with Coach Jim Boone, legendary head basketball coach and Winfield native as well, just a quick reminder that if you have not already figured out what Big Shots is, you probably should, because it's a great opportunity for young athletes, young student athletes, I should say, to get involved, get some recognition and some exposure as well. And just to give a little bit more context to that, the CEO and president, Jeff Snyder, is a West Virginia guy. So what he does is he's done a bunch of different tournaments across 5 different states, both the Carolinas, Virginia, Tennessee, West Virginia, just to name a few. But a tremendous opportunity for young student athletes just to get some recognition, to get some college exposure in front of college recruits as well. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend you go on to the Big Shots website at bigshots.net. And from there are a bunch of tabs at the top, from events to registration, the brackets, live streaming as well, and even rankings as well. And as those get posted, more and more look for your name. If you don't see your name on there, don't be discouraged. Do not feel discouraged, because that just means you need to have more fuel to the fire to work harder. So with that being said, again, go check them out, bigshots.net. And as always, go hoop some basketball. But let's continue this discussion with our guest, Mr. Jim Boone. And Coach, when you look at your career, especially early on, you mentioned how you took the $6,000 and you used that. You had to sleep in a dorm, eat in a dining hall. Then time was another thing as well. But you also mentioned some positives as well, like being able to see different types of practices, being able to learn from different coaches as well. But for you, outside of those things that you had mentioned that were hurdles, what were some other hurdles that you had to jump over as a young head or as a young coach, I should say?
Well, again, I think the difficult thing and the thing that discourages a lot of young guys once they get into coaching is we see the guys out there that are coaching at the elite levels, at the Power Five schools, and the amount of money that is involved in not only their programs but also in their individual salaries and what they can do with camps and all those kind of things. So, you know, you, if you're getting into it for money, you're making a really poor decision, because 90, 95% of coaches out there aren't doing it for the money. They're doing it because of the opportunity to make an impact in young people's lives, to help them grow, to help them be successful. One of the things, Taylor, that we strive to do is give our guys the skill set to become better husbands, better fathers, and better leaders in their communities. And that's more important to me than any amount of money that I could ever make. But as a young guy, a lot of times, it's hard because you're scraping to make it. And if you're not willing to invest in that, if you're not willing to invest in yourself and to pay that price, this profession has a way of weeding guys out. And I can't tell you the number of guys that I started with that ended up going different directions just because it was too hard, too much money, too much time, whatever. So from the financial part of it's difficult, and then you're starting at the bottom, and which I think is great because it gives you an opportunity to learn all aspects of the program and what you need to do to build a program. But it's not always the most glamorous situation when you're cleaning the floor or you're washing the uniforms or you're you've got dorm duty for camp and making sure kids are behaving in the dorms and are in on time, and whatever the job might be. But those are all important as you build and grow towards moving up the ladder, so to speak. The time commitment is amazing, and people talk about balance all the time, and I think balance is different for different people. For me, I wasn't a guy. So I get asked this question a lot of times. I get asked, okay, what did you do to get where you are? And what can we do? I get asked that by young coaches all the time. And, for me, it's not necessarily what I did to get where I am. It's what I didn't do. It's the things that you're willing to give up. You're not going to be able to, I wasn't able to take some of the family vacations. So what did I do? I made my family a part of our basketball program. I wasn't able to make trips home all the time, but my parents came and saw us play wherever I was coaching at. So there's ways that you transition through that, but you've got to be willing to make those kind of sacrifices if you're going to continue to grow and be a head coach at this level. And just you mentioned we talked briefly about some of the guys in my area. Brian Porter was right behind us. He's coaching at West Virginia State now. I mean, it's just I constantly go back to those roots at Winfield, and how many of us ended up going into coaching. And I think that it has a lot to do with the guys like, again, the Leon McCoys, the Alan Osborns, the Jake Hunts, the Bill Walls, the Ron Chambers, the Doug McElwains, the Brad Hodges, all those guys, the Jim D'Agostines that coached, and the influence they had on so many different kids to get into coaching. So I'm sorry, I've rambled a little bit, but yeah, you give up a lot, and you have to make a lot of sacrifices to continue to move up and put yourself in a position where you can support your family and have this profession as a way to support yourself.
So a team that I want to talk about specifically with you, and I've mentioned this already, and that is that 2011-2012 West Virginia Wesleyan team. Now I'm scrolling through that roster, and as I'm going through this roster, I'm seeing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 players from the state of West Virginia, including, and if people don't notice already, this podcast is just going to consistently revolve around Winfield. But one guy that people may remember, Caleb Ashley, actually played at West Virginia Wesleyan for Coach Boone. So, Coach, before we talk about the team, let's talk about Caleb Ashley. What kind of player was he at West Virginia Wesleyan for you?
Caleb was a hard-nosed, tough kid who was a really good shooter, but just had a knack for being able to score, and was a very important part of that team, and played very significant minutes on that team's run into the NCAA tournament. You know, Taylor, I would be remiss if I didn't say, we inherited those guys. We didn't go out and recruit them.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Tusculum College and was really happy at Tusculum. I had made that transition when we left Eastern Michigan. It was an opportunity to coach my son. He got to play his senior year at Greenville High School, which was at that time a AA high school in Tennessee, but one that had a tremendous basketball reputation and a great coach in its own right. And so Jimmy came on and played for me at Tusculum, which, as great as that was, and it was awesome having your son play for you. Again, that was priceless. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But having him coach with me now is even better than it was when he was playing for me. But I was at Tusculum, and we had things going. We had a great program. We were one of the top 3 schools in the South Atlantic Conference, and we'd been to the NCAA tournament and so on and so forth. And Ken Tyler, the athletic director at West Virginia Wesleyan, actually contacted me. He had heard that I'd interviewed at a couple spots and wanted to know if I'd be interested in their job. Now, this was in like August. And I said, well, I'm not sure, but we talked a little bit more, and to make a long story short, it was an opportunity for me to move home. My dad still lived in Winfield, and so I was literally, what is that, a 2.5-hour trip, 2-hour trip at most, probably not even 2 hours. And so basically to be at home and come back to a state where every time you walk into a young man's home, people already know who you are. It's not reintroducing yourself every time you start to recruit somebody. So I was really excited about that. And we had a young man, Raymond McElroy, that played for us, was going to play for us at Tusculum, that came with us and made the transfer. And Jimmy, my son, came with us as one of our assistant coaches. And we hired a guy named Ryan Charball, who had some California University roots where I had been at. And we inherited a great group. Jeff Price had been the coach there the year before and just did a fabulous job and really had recruited a really neat team. We had a Kelsey Williams, a post player. His older brother, had played for me at Cal. So he had considered leaving when Coach Price left, and I'm coming in. And so without going through all that, yeah, we had a very talented team. I mean, McElroy in a week's time scored something like 48, 42, and 40 in 3 consecutive games. We won some huge games. I remember we held Alderson brought us to like 39 points or some astronomical number like that defensively in the conference tournament in Charleston. But Kelsey, the post player I mentioned, he basically broke his foot and tried to play through it. And losing him we just didn't have a chance playing against some of the high-powered West Liberty teams back in the day. But bringing it back to fruition, Caleb was a huge part of that. And in our win over Winston-Salem State, which was a huge victory for us and the first in the school's history against a Division II team in NCAA tournament play, Caleb played a very instrumental role in helping us win that game.
Okay, so for people that don't know, as everybody, well, as a lot of people should know, I'm a huge fan of the Mountain East Conference, better known as the MEC. So now what Coach Boone is referring to is still the MEC, but before that, it was referred to the WVIAC. So for people that don't know that, there's your little tidbit of history. But he coached in the MEC pretty much one of the first few years at that conference that changed names and the little things like that. But Coach, let's talk about what you're doing nowadays, and especially now that you are at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith. So you got this will be your third season with the program, and it seems like the last few years may have been weird, especially with COVID. Sort of walk us through that. What have these last few years like been for you, especially with last year's?
Well, again, we were really very pleased and happy and very blessed to be at Delta State University. And again, because of the great job we were doing there, had an opportunity to have a conversation with the athletic director at Arkansas Fort Smith. And one of the caveats there is Jimmy, my son, had been working for us, but Mississippi has very, very stringent nepotism rules. And so they would not allow him to be a paid employee of the university. So he was working for us basically as a volunteer assistant and working, half days at a car lot and then running our camps. And so when UAFS came into the picture and an opportunity for me to take this job, understanding that it was kind of right up what we had made our niche at. It was a program that was in disarray. They had just lost their coach. He was actually the second coach they'd had in less than a year. It was an opportunity to go in and take over a program that had skipped 2 recruiting cycles. They had a previous coach who was very successful, built a outstanding Division II program, had a chance to move, and he did. When he did, as typical as today is, a lot of the better players that he had recruited left and went with him. So he didn't do this until late July, 1st of August. So then you've got the new coach coming in. He didn't really get a chance to recruit. He ends up running into a little snafu in the middle of the year. So he moves on. And so now here's us. We've missed 2 recruiting cycles, but I had a chance to come in to try to bring some structure, some order, some discipline to the program, and a chance to hire my son. And as I mentioned, the opportunity to coach Jimmy was tremendous. The opportunity to coach with him, side by side with him, has been even better. His feel for the game, his ability to teach it, his knowledge, particularly on the offensive side, really complements all the things that we're doing from my perspective. So that's been great. But we walk in there and we pretty much inherit a group that has some issues. Obviously, they haven't been heavily recruited, but we had a couple just great kids that were just hard workers. We added a few guys to that, and we gained a ton of momentum because what happens is we move into a new league. We're in the Lone Star Conference, which that was UAFS's first year. My first year was our first year in that league. And for those listeners that may know, the Lone Star is considered one of the best, if not the best league in Division II in the country. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is just, it's unbelievable from top to bottom. Like the Mountain East Conference, the top schools in the Mountain East Conference would do extremely well in the Lone Star. But the Lone Star's bottom teams, and I hate to say it in that way, bottom, because they're all so good, it's just the league from top to bottom is so strong, so athletic, so very much a transfer-oriented league, which we're not in terms of how we're building it. But so here we are moving into that league, and somehow we make the tournament the first year and have a heck of a season. Really finish on a high note. We've got everybody excited. We got a ton of momentum, and then COVID hits. And so we've got to go through last year where we spent, and I'm happy. I'm so happy for our guys that they got a chance to go compete and play. But Taylor, it was just so hard. I mean, we spent more time in quarantine than we did on the court. And it's just really difficult to spend, 2 weeks quarantine, then come out and practice for 2 days and go play a game. It's almost impossible. So we couldn't get any rhythm. We couldn't get any, we had a young team. They needed that practice time. But again, later in the year, we had a chance to really get our legs under us, to get some practice time. We didn't spend nearly as much time in quarantine. We were getting to spend more time on the court. And we turned around and we upset the number 13 ranked team in the country in Dallas Baptist. And then we beat St. Ed's, one of the top 3 or 4 teams in our league. And so we're really feeling pretty good coming into this season. So I like where our team is right now. I like what we've accomplished. I think we've set a good foundation into place, but it's still a work in progress. And we're, as I mentioned, we're excited about this group. I really like this team, but it's a day-to-day process for us, and we're just hoping we can get through this season and not have some of the stoppages that we had to go through, that all of us in Division II had to go through last year.
Couple more. Okay, so let's step away from you coaching and let's go more. I want to go more under the microscope. You've been around for a long time in regards to collegiate coaching. So my question to you is this. Let's start off with this. You've coached a ton of players. In your mind, what does it take for you to see hold on, let me rephrase this. What does it take for somebody to be a very hard worker, a very hardworking player to get time on the court? What does that take for you in your eyes?
Well, I think there's a couple things there, and we try to recruit. We try to build our program with high school guys, and then we're going to sprinkle in the right guys that are transfers. So the first thing is this, Taylor, and I'm a firm believer in this, and having made this my career, my profession, I want our players to be a part of my family. I want them to be guys that I'm going to enjoy having at my home. I love going to practice. I like practice more than the games themselves. And so I want to enjoy that time I'm at practice. I want to be around good people who are motivated to be the best they can be, that have that desire to be great. And so, I think there's a couple of things that starts with, and it starts with recruiting guys of very high character. And I think that does translate into becoming a very good player. So number one is guys of very high character. Number two, guys who are very high energy. I'm not real good with guys who are moody, or, one day they come in and they're excited to be there, and the next day they come in and they're moping around. I'm not real good with those guys. I want guys who are excited to be there every day. And then particularly, which I've really kind of we found our niche at this level, because number one, I think you can be very successful with the guys that I'm talking about. But number two, academics is really important. And we want guys that want to be here to get their degree. And, that doesn't mean you have to be a 4.0 student, but it means that you understand the value of your education and you want to get your degree. And if we can find guys that fit into those three categories, then we're going to recruit around the pillars of our culture, which are hard work, toughness, passion, unity. I don't think there's any substitute for toughness. So we're always looking for those guys like Caleb that you mentioned earlier that are just tough, hard-nosed, blue-collar guys that are going to, they're going to fight you to win. Not literally, but you know what I mean. So those are the guys that I think can really come in and be hard-working, quality basketball players in your program. And those are the guys that we try to search out in our recruiting process. And as we vet through the number of players that come across our desk as film and recommendations and the number of players that we see in the summer, it's not just about your talent level. You can't win just on talent. Now, to be a great player, yeah, you've got to have talent, but you've also got to have a very high IQ. And that doesn't mean you got to be the smartest guy in the room, but you've got to be a guy that understands the game. And I think that the academic part of it and understanding the game, those things kind of go hand in hand. And then you've got to be relentless. And that's the toughness piece. That's the competitive piece. That's the guy that is just not going to be I want to be good. He's the guy that says, I have to be good. He's not the guy that wants to get his degree. He's the guy that says, I have to get my degree. And we can find those kind of guys. We've got a chance to put together a pretty good group.
Okay, so we mentioned that. So now looking more again at player personnel, when you have a guy that's just really down in the weeds, and he's trying to get better, but he's lacking that self-confidence, what's your main message to him just to continue to just do what he does best, and that's just work hard?
Well, it's really tough in today's world because of the there's always somebody tugging at him to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, Taylor, that we really stress is that failure is a part of it. And you've got to go through some tough times, and you've got to experience some failure along the way, because that's what helps you to grow. So, like we tell our guys, if you get knocked down, if we get knocked down as a team, or you get knocked down as a player, stay there for a second, figure out, what happened? Why am I here? Why did I not why am I not having success? What do I need to do better? And then come back stronger and jump right up and get back in it and come back stronger, come back to improve in whatever area that it is. I'm a big believer in staying positive and just coming in with high energy. And, it's so mental. Are you going to have the victims mentality, or you're going to have the victor's mentality? You're going to come in and it's woe is me and everybody's against me, and it's too hard, the coach is picking on me, or whatever it is. Or are you going to be the guy that says, you know what, okay, this is what I got to do to get better, and I want to do that. I'm going to improve in these areas, and I'm going to prove to the coach, and better yet, I'm going to prove to myself that I can do this. I'm right. I can make this. And so we just try to instill that type of attitude in our guys. I walked into our team meeting this year and I had two signs. I had one that said believe, and I said that one says it can't be done. It can't be done, with the T crossed out in red. It can be done. The T's crossed out. Mm-hmm. And said, we've got to be inside out in our thought process here. We've got to stop listening to what everybody else says. And that's the same thing as an individual player. You've got to believe in you. You got to quit listening to what everybody else is trying to tell you, that you can't do this, or you can't do that, or you can't be this player. And you've got to believe it, but then you've got to put into work to make it happen, because it can be done. It can be done. And that's the attitude that we want to take. We want our team to take, and our individual players to take, as they approach going through this continuum of being a college basketball player.
You're an interesting follow on social media, and I'll end with this. You're an interesting follow on social media. For people that are not following Coach Boone, go follow him on Twitter at Coach Jim Boone, just at Coach Jim Boone. And Coach, you posted something back on September 15th that I just to this hour, it gives me chills because it's so relatable and it's so true. You tweeted a quote by John Gordon. It says, 5% of a person's life is made up of our own performance on game day. 95% is made up of the time we are preparing and practicing. And then you said underneath that, the same is true for basketball players. Champions are made and championships are won without the bright lights, when nobody is watching. When you think of that quote and just the way that you've approached basketball for close to 40 years now as a coach, how imperative is that just to continue to drill that message into your players' heads each and every day, regardless of the situation?
Yeah, and I tell you what, that's a life lesson. That's not just a basketball lesson. That's how you're successful in life. Taylor, the point we brought out with our own team and our own players was simply this: in our sport, we actually go out there and play games probably around 7 or 8% of the time. So 7 to 8% of the time you're playing in front of people with the lights on. But the other 92 to 93% of the time, the vast majority of your time, you're spending in preparation. You're spending in work. You're putting in long hours when nobody's watching, when there's nobody around. There are no bright lights. There's just you, the ball, the gym. And, you can translate that into every aspect of life, whether it's coaching, teaching, being a salesperson, a writer, whatever it is that you choose to do. It's all the work that goes behind the scenes. It's the preparation that puts you into a position. So in that 5% of the time when you are in the so-called under the lights, you're prepared. You're ready. You're ready for the moment. You're ready to be successful. And so, yeah, that's the message that we're trying to drill into our guys all the time. And that was important to me. And I found the perfect picture. I was just sitting there kind of going through on the internet, surfing around, and I saw that picture of Kobe. And of all people, just one of the hardest workers, one of the most driven basketball players of all time. A guy that totally changed his game from the time he came in the league until the time he retired. But here's Kobe, and it shows him in their practice facility with all the lights off, and he's working on his game. And it made me think of all the players that have played for us that I've walked out of my office late at night and I've heard a ball bouncing and stick my head in the gym, and there's maybe one light on or just a scoreboard, and there's somebody down there at the other end, one of our players working on his game. And there's nothing that makes me smile more than to see that. And it brings me right back to those times, Taylor, at Winfield High School of coaches provided me the opportunity to get in the gym on a Friday night, on a Saturday night when everybody was going out on date night, and I'm in the gym with only the scoreboard lights on. Maybe me, maybe Jimmy or Charlie Tribble, maybe Bob Starkey, and we're in there working on our game, preparing for the opportunity when the moment presented itself to be the best player that we can be. And so again, that was huge. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm happy that you saw it, and thanks for mentioning it. I'm glad it meant something to you as well.
Again, I mean, for people that do not follow Coach Boone, I recommend you and I encourage you to do so, just because I'm a follower, and every time I see Coach Boone tweeting, I'm like, okay, what's he saying now? What can I learn today that I can apply to my life? And I have. And that quote that I just mentioned was one of the many quotes that I've seen Coach Boone post that just really sticks out to me. So, Coach, I appreciate that. And I also appreciate your time as well. Thank you for joining me today. It was great to finally do this with you. One, but two, it's just great to interact with people from Winfield.
Well, Taylor, I appreciate it, and I think your listeners should know that you relentlessly pursued me to be on, and we kept running into scheduling conflicts and snafus, and your persistence made it happen. So that's part of being a winner, and I, for one, appreciate that and the opportunity to be with another Winfield guy, another West Virginia guy. I told you when we were talking off air that I'll always, and I think every West Virginian says this, West Virginia will always be home for me. It's once you've been a part of those mountains, it's you may live somewhere else, but you never leave them. And yeah, this was special, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your listeners. Because the state means so much to me, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, Coach. And again, I encourage you all to go check out Coach Boone, as well as he and his team get ready for yet another season in college basketball, as he and his team are competing yet again this year in the 21-22 season at Arkansas Fort Smith. So again, I encourage you to follow along with them. Again, follow along with Coach Boone as well on Twitter at Coach Jim Boone. At Coach Jim Boone. Well, Coach, I appreciate your time as always, and best luck the rest of the way for you all, and we will talk soon.
That sounds great, Taylor. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, that will conclude this episode of Hoops Across the Mountain State with our terrific guest, Coach Jim Boone, a Winfield guy. And as everybody knows, I'm a big Winfield person just because that's where I spent the latter part of my childhood and adolescent career as well. So I appreciate Coach Boone joining me as well. Again, I encourage you all to go check out Big Shots. If you haven't already, go on bigshots.net. And there are tons and tons and tons of information on there for you all to explore and learn about this neat opportunity for young student athletes to go and display their performances. You can just go display their overall game to collegiate coaches as well, because they get tons and tons and tons of college coaches and scouts there as well. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest news about this podcast, and especially now that we are moving into the fall and winter months, a new line of clothing will be coming out. Yes, a new line of clothing. You may not know this, but I am in the works of potentially getting a hoodie involved, because as many people know, I'm a big hoodie person. So I will be designing a hoodie and possibly a long sleeve as well. I will get feedback from that, sort of see what the numbers look like as well. But t-shirts are always available as well. You can always DM me or send me a message, however that's capable or best suited for you. You can do that as always. But yet again, I appreciate all the love and support from everybody, because again, this podcast would not be possible without you all. And again, thank you all for that. Again, go subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Go give us a rating. Just go show some love. I always love seeing the feedback and love as well. But with that being said, this will conclude episode 66 of Hoops Across the Mountain State, again with our terrific guest, Coach Jim Boone. And I will catch you all next time on episode 67. Everybody have a good rest of your day, evening, or morning, however you may be listening, and we will talk soon. Stay safe.